We are going live. That's right. We are going live right now. I realize I need to move this rascal over just a little bit, and so that it can not be in my face. Actually, I'm trying to stream on Instagram at the same time, so that's why you see that little rascal there. And then I'm looking right at you. So I hope you've had a marvelous weekend and a great week. I've been kind of off doing live for the last 2 weeks. That I've been traveling and doing some speaking retreats and doing some marriage intensives in Wisconsin, Virginia. And it's been a wonderful time just being with people and encouraging people through the retreats and then helping some marriages that are in high distress find some level of connection again and hope for the future. And that's what we do in our marriage intensives is we really do help couples who had a lot of therapy, nothing's really working for them. And what we do is help get them hope again and a path and a plan and the skills, that's the key, and the skills and tools to create what they want for the future. What we believe is a healthy, strong, connected sense of usness. That's what we call it. All right. Now, here we go. If you're hanging in there, you want to take some notes, feel free. We're going to talk about 7 ways that you will know that you are the problem. Have you ever noticed it's pretty easy to blame people? It takes nothing to blame another person, even for our own choices. The things that we do that create hurt and harm. It's easier to blame others and not take responsibility. I have found it takes a lot of courage to own one's issues. It takes a lot of courage to admit that someone made a mistake. It takes a lot of courage to admit that maybe you were hasty, or maybe you were impulsive, or maybe you didn't wait and get all the information. Or maybe that you were reactive rather than responding. You see, it doesn't take a lot of thoughtfulness for those kind of things. Matter of fact, those kind of things just shows our immaturity. It shows where we are operating out of that lower order animal brain back here, the brainstem, the fight or flight freeze response of the brain. And I just found it's easier to look out the window and see everything else. It takes a lot more courage to look in the mirror. This is going to be one of those looking in the mirror lives today. When I got married, 37 February coming up, 38 years. But when I got married 37 years ago, many of you who've been tracking me on these lives have learned that I was emotionally still a child. My parents could not raise us to be healthy, mature adults because relationally, emotionally, they were not mature adults either. And so you can't raise somebody something that you're not. And so when I got married, I did love Luella, that's for sure. However, I did not know how to love well, and I surely didn't know how to relate well, so I could love well. And so, the work that we do and the curriculum that we provide in the process and program we create here in our work is called Relate Well. Relate Well is a relationship skills-based curriculum where we give people the skills and tools for bonding and attachment, how to emotionally regulate, and make healthy, wise choices. That the key to relating well is being able to own your own stuff. We operate by 4 core principles of living. We choose to live our life by these 4 core principles. Number 1, we want to live our lives being people of goodwill. Goodwill. In other words, goodwill is no matter what I do, I don't seek to hurt you, harm you, invalidate you, negate you, tear you down. Whenever you operate in ill will, you're hurting someone. Whether you care or not is a different conversation, you see. We believe that when you treat people with ill will, you're going to sow ill will. It's the law of attraction. Anger attracts anger. Fear attracts fear. Discord attracts discord. You will reap what you sow. And so one of the things we do in our work is always live a life of goodwill. Now, People of goodwill recognize there is ill will in blaming others for one's choices, for not being willing to look in the mirror and own one's stuff, to see what role that I had, what role have I been playing in this issue, in this power struggle, or whatever it is you have going on in your marriage or relationship. The second word is respect. Respect is honoring and valuing another person. Whenever you dishonor or devalue someone, you're basically sending the message that they don't matter, that they have no value. And there's no goodwill in that. And you never control someone. You never manipulate someone. You never try to make somebody do something they don't want to do. Why? It's disrespectful. I also believe it's disrespectful to not own your own stuff. I think it's disrespectful to put your issues off on someone else, to blame others for the problems that you are creating in a relationship. It takes a lot of maturity to live a life of maturity, to live a life of goodwill and respect. Why? Because people who are emotionally mature own their own choices. They're self-aware. We'll talk about these 7 ways in which you will know if you are the problem. The third principle that we live by and relate well is empathy. Empathy is a sense of being able to put someone else's shoes on, being able to feel what they feel, understanding their thoughts and feelings. You don't have to agree with empathy, but you need to at least, and this is the word we use, you need to care how someone thinks and feels. I don't agree with how you think and feel, but you never send the message, I don't care. That's a lack of empathy. Now, the fourth word that we live by, and we call these four words goodwill, respect, empathy, and humility. We call those the 4 protectors of an us, the 4 things that protect the relationship, but they also ensure that we are healthy, mature people. They may ensure that I'm a mature person and that I can relate well so I can love well, because you can't love well if you don't know how to relate well. Humility is a very powerful way to live life, because this is key. People who are humble admit their weaknesses. They admit their strengths. They're okay with not being okay. Did you get that? They're okay with not being okay. See, most people aren't okay with not being okay. And because most people aren't okay with not being okay, then they try to live their life and orchestrate their life with the mask, or they try to be this or try to be what everybody else wants to be. Why? So they can feel okay, but down inside they really don't believe they are okay. And we say it in this way, in our world, we say it this way: when you get to a place that it's actually okay to not be okay, you'll be okay. When you get to a place that it's okay to not be okay, you'll be okay. How do I know that? Because once you get to that place where it's okay to not be okay, your heart settles down, you admit your strengths, you admit your weaknesses, and it's okay. Why? We're human. You're giving yourself permission to be human. And now you have the ability to be the person you were designed to be, not to be what you think somebody else wants you to be, or living in rebellion. To live a life of rebellion towards things is really, in my mind, it's an unhealthy life. Always reacting to things, you're just showing how immature you are, but you're never fully being the person you could be. All right, now here we go. 7 ways to know that you are the problem. 7 ways to know that you are the problem in a relationship. Are you ready? Here we go. Number 1, you lack self-awareness. You lack self-awareness. Self-awareness is the first component of what we know as emotional intelligence. All right. Daniel Goleman wrote the book on emotional intelligence back in the 90s, and it has sold, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of copies. It was really written for the business world, but really it's a book about healthy living and healthy relating. You see, under emotional intelligence, there's personal competencies that every individual has to accomplish. And after you master these two personal emotional competencies, then you master higher relational competencies. So the first two personal emotional competencies a person has to develop is self-awareness. Self-awareness. What is self-awareness? People who are self-aware, my brother Don, who's like a level 5, he is a level 5 leader. He's the highest level of emotional intelligence. He's a wonderful man and a leader, and he loves doing personal development work and mentoring people just as much as I do. But self-awareness is the ability to, the way Don and I put it, it's like having this other person in your head looking back at you, and you're aware of exactly everything you're doing. You know what you're doing. You know what you're feeling. Because to have self-awareness, you have to have an emotional vocabulary. You can identify what you're feeling in a moment. And when you can identify, I'm getting angry. I'm feeling betrayed. I'm feeling disrespected. That's self-awareness. And having this little person back here looking at you, you're also aware of what your actions are. You're aware of how you're coming across. See, most people aren't aware how they're coming across. I say it this way in our work. Most people aren't okay with not being okay. Got it? We said that earlier. But here's a bigger piece. Ready? Most people in their mind have an understanding of how they are. They have an understanding, a belief, a perception of how they're coming across. But what they don't know is the way they think they're coming across is not the way they actually are coming across. The way you think you're being perceived is not the way that you are being perceived. And what people do is they tend to defend how they think they are or believe they are. But in the end, it's how you are that matters. In other words, Rick Marks, I wasn't aware that I was manipulative. I didn't have the self-awareness to know that I was passively aggressive. I didn't have the self-awareness to know that I was mostly a child and I dealt with conflict in my marriage in childish, immature ways. I lacked the self-awareness for it because of my immaturity. I had to become aware, self-aware. Now, how did I do that? Well, for me, one of the ways that I tended to develop my self-awareness was I needed some kind of feedback loop of how I was coming across. And yeah, Luell could tell me. The problem was I going to be teachable, right? But one of the things I realized is I can use other people as a reflection of who I am. Example, my mentor, Lori Gordon, said to me a long time ago, I was complaining about Luella. And as I was complaining about her, Dr. Gordon said to me, do you want to know why Luella is the way she is with you? And I said, I know why. Listen to my lack of self-awareness here. And she said, why? I said, she came from an alcoholic home and has a lot of woundedness. And Lori said to me, well, are you open to another perspective? And I'm like grasshopper here, right? I'm the student. There's the master. Yes, ma'am. In almost word for word, she said, Rick, have you considered the possibility that Luella is the way she is with you because of how you are as a way of being? You trained her to be that way. You taught her to be that way. What would you expect her to do? Dr. Phil says it a little simpler in his TV shows. He says it this way, that we actually teach people how to be around us. You see, I taught Luella to be that way based on how I was as a way of being. So I wasn't aware of how I was. I was aware of how I believed I was, but I wasn't aware of how I was. They're not the same. So here's what I came up with. The way you know how you look, physically look, people say it's a mirror. That's not actually true. Because you also know how you look by a car window, a glass door, water. All of those reflect your image. They reflect your image. In other words, you know what you look like by a reflection. were you aware that how you are as a way being is also reflected? It's also reflected on people's faces, their eyes, their body language. People reflect who you're being in a moment. And what I did to develop some self-awareness, I began to watch people's body language around me to see how they were. And rather assume it was about them, I would assume I might have been creating it, and I would ask about it. I might say, hey, Luella, I notice you're shutting down. What am I doing that's causing that? And if she said nothing, then I was okay. But she might say, well, you're coming across as manipulative. I don't want to hear that. But then I want to be teachable. I'm trying to become self-aware. And I would say, well, what am I doing that's sending you that message? And she said, well, you're doing this, this, and this. And I would say, when I do those things, that sends you the message that I'm being manipulative? She said, yes. And I would say, forgive me then. Because if that is sending you that message, then I don't want to send that message. I love you and care about you. I'll do it differently. And I would shift. You must become self-aware. Why? Because when you develop self-awareness, this is the other way you will know. It's number 2 way you know that you could be the problem. You also lack self-control. You lack self-control. So the first way you know that you're the problem is because of your lack of self-awareness. The second way is because of your lack of self-control. Now, you can't have self-control without self-awareness. You got it? You can't stop yourself from doing something if you're not aware that you're doing it. But once you're aware you're doing it, now you have a responsibility to regulate it, to manage yourself, self-management, self-regulation. So you've got to have self-control. You've got to bite your tongue. You got to take that deep breath before you say what you want to say. I learned there were a lot of proverbs out there. One is a Jewish proverb that I really like. It says, a fool appears wise when he keeps his mouth shut. See, I used to think if I thought it or felt it, it needed to be shared. But then I found out mature people know when to talk and when not to talk, when to say something or not to say something. That's wisdom. I didn't have that kind of wisdom, which actually showed my immaturity and lack of self-awareness and lack of self-control. But I'm developing self-control now. So I learned a phrase from a mentor. He said to me, when in doubt, keep it out. When in doubt, keep it out. In other words, if you doubt, you should say it. If you doubt that you should do it, don't. Let the doubt be the filter, you see. So when in doubt, keep it out. So the second way that we know that we're the problem is your lack of self-control. You know, mature people are aware of how they are, even at the emotional level. They have an emotional vocabulary. They can label those emotions, and they self-regulate. They bite their tongue. They operate from the higher order brain and are responsive. They're not operating from the lower brain, which is reactive, which is evidence of a lack of self-control. Self-control comes from the higher order rational mind. This lower order animal brain, it just reacts to the environment. There's no control to that. It's animalistic. Animals do that. Sadly, a lot of couples fight for that lower order animal reptilian brain, if you will. And they wonder why they destroy each other and destroy the us. Is because you'll never solve problems. You're never going to listen to each other. You'll never have good understanding as long as you're operating for that lower brain. Why? Because that brain doesn't have any rational controls to it. You got to access the higher order thinking brain to regulate the lower order brain. That's why I learned to take a deep breath, slow my heart down, self-soothe, call a timeout, stop the negative action, get away for a little bit, come back and talk about it using a skill later. The third way to know that you are a problem in the relationship is that you have an unresolved addiction or some mental illness. You have an unresolved addiction or some mental illness or emotional problem that is not being worked on. You know, an active addiction undermines marriage. An active addiction undermines any relationship. Addicts don't bond to people. Addicts bond to objects, you see. And they get all their emotional relation needs met through the object, through the acting out. Alcohol, drugs, sex, masturbation, pornography, religion, food addictions, sport addictions, video game addictions. You get all your emotional relation needs met through that. But because you're getting your emotional relational needs met through an addiction, through an object or a process, then what happens is over time the addict personality develops in you, and the addict personality doesn't respect other people. The addict personality is going to do what it wants to do. The addict personality will never be blamed for anything. It's always someone else's fault. And underneath every addiction is a deep, deep, deep level of shame. A deep level of shame. There's so much guilt and fear and insecurities. But the addict isn't able to go to those places because there's too much pain there. So they keep medicating it and living in the addiction to medicate the pain of all that disconnection, all that loneliness, all that shame, all that fear. If you have an addiction and you're listening to me, you need to get in recovery. Recovery isn't just about stopping the acting out. That's essential. But true recovery is about rejoining and reconnecting to human relationships in healthy, intimate ways. Not about control, not about power, not about manipulation, because that's what you do with objects. We manipulate objects. That's why addicts treat people as objects, because you manipulate objects. Healthy relationships are built on the principle of negotiation. You negotiate differences. That's a person. But addicts operate on the principle of manipulation. Why? Because people are objects to be manipulated in order to keep the addiction going. You've got to get into an active recovery program. Why? Because if you're not in an active recovery program, in AA, there's a term called dry drunk. The idea behind dry drunk is an addict is not actually drinking. They're sober from drinking. But the addict personality is still in control of them. Thus, they still treat people as if they're drinking, though they may not be drinking. Recovery is not about stopping the acting out, but it's arresting the addict personality and reinserting the part of you that wants connection to God, self, and others, that's looking for relationship, reinserting that part of you and letting it become the dominant personality, and you regulate the addict side of you, not giving it power over you anymore. Number 4, how do you know if you're a problem? Number 4, you don't take responsibility for your choices. You always live in the it's your fault mode. I'm not to blame. It's your fault. Well, I did this because you did that. It's this idea that somehow whatever happens around you, you're just something that reacts to everything. You in other words, you see yourself as almost powerless. You're a victim, and all you do is respond. It's like you're a ping pong ball, constantly responding to people's stuff, not seeing that a lot of times you're creating the things, that you actually are powerful, and that you are powerful in creating problems in your unhealthiness, in your immaturity. Ever thought that maybe the things you blame others for, maybe, just maybe, you're the reason? You're the cause? You're the initiator? You know, that takes humility. Pride is pretty easy. Have you ever thought about that? Living in pride is easy. You don't think about it. We just do it. It's almost like all humans have this core pride issue that says, I'm not wrong, you're wrong, and don't mess with me. I'm right. It's because that part of us doesn't value relationship. That part of us is about right and wrong. Notice Americans don't want to take responsibility for choices. We want to blame others. I heard a long time ago at a business seminar that one of the differences between corporations in Japan versus here in the United States, that if something goes wrong, in America, we look for someone to blame. In Japan, they don't look for someone to blame, they just fix it. Did you get the difference? They just fix it. Because they realize there are probably a lot of different things taking place, and there's a lot of different people responsible for something. But everybody looks in the mirror for themselves. Here, I don't want to take responsibility. And if I did this or said these things to you, it's because you did those things to me. If you think about it, when you live that way, you actually make you sound like you're a very weak person. That you're really very weak. That you don't have the ability to self-regulate and say, no, I chose to do that because that's what I chose to do. I could have responded in a different way or more mature way. And number 4, how to know if you're the problem is you don't take responsibility. You live in this, it's not my fault posture. Number 5, how to know if you are the problem. Number 5, you live in this sense of it's my way or the highway. You heard that old phrase? We're going to do it my way. That Frank Sinatra song, right? I did it my way. Oh, by the way, and I'm going to do it my way at the expense of you. You either follow me or get out of the way. I'm right, you're wrong. I know what's best. You know, people who live in this idea of it's my way or the highway, the reason they live this way is really pride. But underneath that pride is a weakness, a deep insecurity. They're not teachable. They have this realm of knowledge, which is really minute. I mean, you think about it. Based on all the knowledge that exists in the world, your realm of knowledge is very, very, very minute. It is, I mean, in a circle, it'd be a really small dot in a circle. That would be your realm of knowledge. And yet when people live in this my way or the highway, it's like they're saying their little dot of knowledge, of all the knowledge in the world, is all the knowledge in the world. What they don't know is they come across as foolish, immature. You know, I've learned that one of the greatest gifts we give ourselves as individuals is the ability to be teachable. The ability to be teachable. That I can learn from other people. That other people can speak into me and teach me things I don't know. You know, in the personal development field, there's what's called mastermind groups. Mastermind groups. You know, our realm of knowledge is very, very, very minute. But what you'll actually find is that really wise people have what are called mastermind groups. A mastermind group is when you go get people who have parts of your brain, who have parts of the brain that you don't have. In other words, I'm not a good business person. I'll tell you that up front, I'm not. But I have someone in my life who is. And when I have to make a business decision, I go to that person. Why? He knows more than me. I've got people who are smarter in different areas, whose knowledge base are different than mine. A mastermind group are when you put 4 or 5 people around you who think differently than you, who know things that you don't know, and you draw from them and learn from them and get their input and feedback before you make a decision. And you might find out when you have a mastermind group, some of the things that you want to do, my way or the highway, might be, oops, I better change the road. I better go down a different highway. Wow, I'm glad I learned that. There's an ancient Chinese proverb that goes like this. If you want to know what's down the road in front of you, ask the people coming back. If you want to know what's down the road in front of you, ask the people coming back. You don't have to walk down that road. You can learn from others who've walked that road ahead of you. Number 6, which kind of flows out of this my way or the highway. Number 6 reason that you're the problem is real simple. You're just not teachable. You're just not teachable. You live in this idea that you know it all and you're smarter than everybody else. That no one else knows what you know. I always tell people, go to college, go to graduate school, and you start talking as if you know it all and see what your professor does. You never learn by talking. You actually learn by listening. And let's be honest, our knowledge base is really, really small. So I can learn from a lot of people. And one of the things that healthy, mature people do is they know that they know. There's a lot of things they don't know. I'm going to say that again. They know. There's a lot of things they don't know. And because they know, there's a lot of things they don't know, they stay teachable. And they go find out the things they don't know. And they know they don't know. They go and ask questions. They learn. They read. They study. They're constantly developing their mind. Why? They also recognize that sometimes my decisions, though this may be deciding what I want, I'll go get input to see if there's something I'm missing. I'll go ask that person to find out if there's something that I'm missing here, I'm overlooking. That's healthy. That's wise. But you're not teachable. And when you're not teachable, really, you're going to be arrogant, cocky, prideful, unbending, unmoving. Because in the end, you're right and everybody else is wrong. And what you really do is you really show your insecurities and immaturity. And the last reason that you'll know that you are the problem. Number 7, the last reason you know that you are the problem is, drum roll, you are not humble. You're actually prideful. You don't walk in humility. Do you know that right now at the global level, if they're being taught leadership at the global level, if you want to be a great future leader in the future, the leaders and those who teach leadership at the global level are suggesting this. To be a great leader in the future, you must develop 2 traits. You must develop the trait of humility as a way of being and empathy. Did you get that? Humility and empathy. Humility. What is humility? Humility is a moderate assessment of oneself. It's knowing what my strengths are and knowing what my weaknesses are. And it's being okay with both. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And it's okay. I'm not great at plumbing, folks. Let me tell you. All right. And I'm humble enough to know it. And my wife used to think I had to be like her father, who was a great handyman. I mean, he could fix anything. Not this guy. And so my wife would build me up. Okay, I'll try to fix that plumbing issue. And then I made it worse, and it cost us $300. Would have cost 50 or 60 if I got a plumber to come in and do it the first time. But because I broke things, more things to fix. I'm not living there anymore. I'm humble enough to know that is not my skill set. That is not my gifting. I know my gifts, and I'm secure in them. And I know what I'm not gifted at. And I'm okay with that too. Why? I'm human. We're never going to know or master everything. Live in your giftings, folks. But admit the things you don't know. Oh, and by the way, humility also acknowledges when you've done something wrong. Humility also is a prerequisite for self-awareness. Humility also is a prerequisite for self-control. Humility is a prerequisite for dealing with your addiction, because the first step of the 12 steps is to admit that you are powerless over something. To admit that you're powerless over something is to move to humility, to take responsibility for one's choices and actions and quit blaming other people requires humility. It's my way or the highway. Requires humility to get out of that. And to be teachable requires humility. You see, of these 7, I think the fact that we're not humble is really the most important of the 7, to know that we're the problem. Because once you move to pride, you're no longer thinking about others, you're thinking about you. That's what pride does. Pride brings the focus to oneself at the expense of others. When you move to humility, particularly in conflict in relationships, folks, when you move to humility in a relationship, once you get to humility in a relationship, now let me say it this way. People who are humble when in conflict don't move to defensiveness. They actually move to compassion and cooperation. They're able to step into somebody else's issues, emotional feelings, even if that person's stuff is about me. You can step into their feelings, hear what they have to say, and not personalize it. Immature people take it personal. Humble people don't personalize it. Why? Because they live in compassion. And out of that compassion, they cooperate. How can we find a way to solve this so that we win? It's not about me anymore. It's about the relationship. Americans will throw a relationship away in order to be right. We'll destroy relationships just to win an argument. Because why? Because in America and in the West, we're all about individualism, particularly America, hyper-individualism, that John Wayne mentality. No wonder he had multiple marriages. You see, the higher way of living is not living for you. It's living for you and others. And others, what I call the us. Don't throw relationships away. Live in such a way that you bring peace to relationships. Live in such a way that you bring goodwill to relationships. Live in such a way that you're respectful in your relationships. Live in such a way that you can bring empathy to relationships. And you can't do that without humility. And here's what we know. To live a life of humility requires emotional adulthood, to being an emotionally mature adult. And here's what I also know. To live a life of maturity makes you a very powerful person. Think on that one. This is Dr. Rick. Have a great day.